Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cash That. This is your host, Joe Dellera, and this episode is once again brought to you by our good friends at Rhythm. Rhythm is the #1 AI betting tool in the market. I use it every day, and you have it on the desktop, and you can have it at your fingertips in the mobile app as well. You get it for a week for free on me, and if you like it, come back, get 25% off with the link right below that in the bio down here. That's Rhythm, helps you with your player props, helps you with your spreads, your totals, everything that you need for player prop and NBA betting. So for today, as you guys can probably see if you're on the YouTube, if you're just hearing for audio, this is going to be the first time then that you're recognizing that we have a guest here, and it's a recurring guest. We've got Prop Bomb over here. Prop Bomb, how you doing today? It's a pleasure to have you back on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on here. I'll always pay homage, and this was the first show I ever kind of did a video or audio appearance, so I'm never going to forget that. And, it's awesome being here. It's always a good time.
Yeah, man. So it's going to be fun. We're getting to the home stretch of the NBA regular season. And, we got about 6 weeks, 2 months-ish left, or not even really, more like 6 weeks of the regular season. It's like a month and a half left. And you're starting to kind of get into the dog days of the regular season. There are the contenders, the teams trying to make that last push, and then there's the other teams that are literally just trying to tank, getting the Cooper flag sweepstakes and everything. With all that kind of going on, I wanted to pick your brain for, and have a little bit of a conversation about how do you handle some of these teams that are that have varying levels of motivation? Especially I feel like the tanking teams it's almost like they're predictable to an extent, but at the same time, it's a little bit more difficult, I think, sometimes to figure out what their rotations are going to be. How do you try to tackle some of these teams that are tanking a little bit?
Yeah, I think you said it best. It's mostly kind of labeling each of the 30 teams in a motivational level, like 1 through 10, where they are. And you kind of categorize them. You got what you just said, the playoff contenders, the ones that on the cusp, and the ones are just flat out tanking. And every team kind of has different types of approaches and ways I look at it. The teams that are tanking, I'm more so curious on the players that are kind of in prove-it situations going into next season. The Washington Wizards are a very good example of that, right? You have Bub Carrington, Keyshawn, I don't know how you say it.
Keyshawn, yeah.
Yeah, just guys that are kind of setting themselves up. It's just more so foreshadowing of what they're going to be for next year. So I'm always paying attention into that. And then for the teams that are pushing for the playoffs, I'll use the Phoenix Suns for an example, leaning in on taking overs on the star players. I think they're going to see massive minutes. And on the flip side, maybe some unders on the role players if they're going to have a short leash. So different types of strategies and situations I'm more so seeing. And, a lot of people are really kind of upset about players sitting out and missing games. But
yeah,
I kind of see it as an opportunity to make money on maybe situations books don't really price the right way yet,
Yeah, because I think with one of the things with the rotations, and we can talk about star players actually first, because I think that people like to bet on star players. It's not anything. It's not a surprise. If you tweet out a play that's on, LeBron James or Steph Curry or Kevin Durant or Anthony Edwards, right? Those plays pop in the algo. If you put out a Kyle Filipowski prop, nobody gives a shit. What are you talking about, dude? So talk to me about the star players, because I think that that's an interesting categorization, right? Because some teams you look at and you go, well, this team, Thunder, for example, or even the Cavs, you go, well, do I need to bet on a star player on this team? Because this team's so far out in front. And then the teams that are tanking, like a Utah Jazz, if it's a Lauri Markkanen, you go, I don't know if I need that there.
Yeah.
But to target teams that are kind of in that influx part seems to be an interesting strategy that you kind of have going.
It goes back to the motivation levels, right? You just said it perfectly. The Utah Jazz, I look at, I have a spreadsheet of every single team that I bet on. Utah Jazz, for the most part, are a bottom half team that I bet on, just because of you don't know what the hell is going on there. You know, one day it's KJ Martin starting, the next day it's Cody Williams. There are so many names and so many different rotations that are being thrown out by the coach. And I have no interest betting on teams like that, or star players like John Collins. I get it, right? It's a low line star player. He has talent, but I don't know what to expect, I don't know what the team is thinking right now. And I'd be more so inclined if on the other side, if it's the New York Knicks and they're facing the Boston Celtics, or if it's the Detroit Pistons and they're facing the Boston Celtics, games that actually matter in the regular season, I want to actually take the star players or the role players. So that's
Yeah.
kind of like how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, because they kind of get up for those games. It's
Yeah.
different. Like Utah, a lot of those quote unquote stars, they were actually playing them. It seemed like that month before the trade deadline is when they were getting their burn because they were
Yeah. I
like,
don't,
oh, let's
yeah.
see if we can maybe raise the stock. Maybe we can trade them.
Yeah.
Now the trade deadline's gone. If like, and I think it's one of the importances of not being like just a hit rate guy, right? And I think that that's one of the things that we both are pretty good at is, like, I think when you're doing a write up, it's a nice thing if you can add it and say, like, yeah, this person's hit this in like X amount of lines or X amount of games out of 10 against, anybody against this team, like whatever the situation is, right? And I think it's like a nice throw in. But there definitely has to be like a little bit more nuance to it, don't you think?
Can you repeat that one more time, Joe?
Saying like in terms of like the hit rate stuff, right? It's nice if you can throw in like, oh, this person's hit
Yeah.
the line in 7 of 10, whatever. But there has to be more nuance to it than that, especially at
Yeah.
this point in the season.
Yeah.
Like that's not like proprietary data.
I don't think, yeah, I think that is the number one thing that, I fell a victim to myself not too long ago is really relying heavily on that hit rate data, or even the same thing as like, oh, he's hit this in games that actually mattered back in October through December, but this
Yeah.
is an entirely different situation. Like, is the motivation, I keep saying the word motivation, but is it the same type of dynamic still there? I mean, are different players on the team, like, Phoenix Suns, Bull stepping up. He wasn't on the team back in October. He
No.
wasn't really in featured rotation. So there's always different little dynamics and things changing up as, teams kind of like close the season. And yeah, I don't really think relying off hit rate is the way you should be approaching these prop betting
Yeah,
strategies.
I do think that one of the things that I like the hit rate data for sometimes is like I'll look at it and say, okay, well, like why did this player
Yeah,
perform
you always
so
like
well in this?
tell a story.
Yeah, and sometimes honestly, like you can look at it and say, okay, well, like Jabari Smith, right? Like because I hit his PR today, cleared that. It was nice against the Pacers, right? And if I looked at because he was over in like 5 of 6 against Indiana, and you look at it and you go, okay, yeah, but that kind of checks out. Indiana plays a lot of single coverage. They're weak to power forwards and centers, like, and then you can kind of tell the narrative, and you go, okay, this makes sense. This checks out. And there's nothing different really on the interior from say like the matchups earlier in the
Yeah,
season or
I
last.
think when you look at sorry to cut you off there, Joe,
No,
but I think when you look at Jabari Smith Jr. and you look at his last games versus the Pacers, you want to make sure though your game and the players playing in those games are still
yeah,
the same thing today. That could be a same type of game where Amen Thompson wasn't featured, maybe was playing 15 to 20 minutes still. I don't know, just stuff like that. You want to make sure that things
100%.
are consistent.
Yeah, and I think that that's like kind of what you can dig into. So it's like you can look at it and say, okay, there's a reason that this player plays well in this matchup. Like Donovan Mitchell has been
Celtics.
just crushes the Celtics,
Yeah,
right?
Celtics.
And you say like, well, why?
Yeah.
And there's a little bit more to it. There's a little bit more nuance to it, but like it definitely can help. Like it can help. I think it can help flag something. And then it's after that point you can say
Yeah.
like, all right, well, like I need to dive into it a little bit more, or I need to look at some projections, I need to look at some modeling, stuff
I
like
think
that.
that's exactly your point. Yeah, like knowing the hit rate is one thing. It should never be, the 100% highest type of like way to look at a prop. But I
Yeah.
think what separates that and then a better that understands basketball is knowing the why. And if you can connect the dots on two things and give more, so I think it just helps you with the analysis and the storytelling.
Yeah, 100%. So I know that you were talking to me before we got on the show, because you're sweating out a little bit of a play right now. You
I don't
got,
even know what's going on. Yeah, my
I
phone.
know. Well,
Yeah,
I'll pull up the screen. I know
yeah.
The
Fill in
Lakers
the
are up
audience
10.
on what's going on.
The Lakers are up 10. So you've got a Dalton Connect ladder going on right now on his points, which is a fun bet. Because
Okay.
he's already got 1 3. He's been in for a couple minutes, but you got him at 10, 15, and 20
Yeah,
points, right?
yeah,
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that because I know previously, like when we first started talking, like you never really hit like bladders or alts. You were always like targeting just straight like -110s,
yeah.
-120s, like whatever. Maybe like a +100. And what kind of changed? What brought in some of that like additional value or like looking to say like, well, look, it's like I think this guy could hit this line in the first half. So why would I not take it up a little bit more? What changed in your process that has made you start to want to incorporate some more of those like alternate lines in your betting?
Yeah, it's a great question. Definitely something I'm trying to like experiment more with. I'm still not so like ladder happy as like
Fair.
just, this is just a one-time thing in a
Yeah.
while, but I really like to try to get into situations that haven't happened yet, try to get ahead of the game. This is the second time this has happened for the Lakers where both Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura are not playing. And, you have LeBron James and Luka Doncic, but who else do you have? Like you're missing a potential of 37 points per game. Someone has to absorb that. So that's why I'm saying like, 9.5. The reason why it's 9.5 points is because he hasn't done it. But what if he had, what if he had a little bit of a higher role back then and he did do it? Maybe this line would be 13.5. So I think this is like a unique situation where like it just hasn't caught up yet, simply.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good point, in terms of even the phrasing that you just used about like trying to capture some of the things that, haven't necessarily happened.
Yeah, and you kind of take a risk doing it.
Yeah.
It's more forecasting than anything, of course. But yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. So I think it's like when we talk about an edge, and it's been a conversation that's going around on like gambling Twitter and like all this other shit. And people are like, oh, well, like it's this, you devig this, you whatever. And I'm like, yes, sure. Like there's a math, like I understand that there's a math aspect to it. I think a lot, like anybody that's really sharp, like kind of understands what the math is, the implied probability, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that when you have like an edge on a play, like this, for example, maybe whether it hits or it doesn't hit,
Yeah,
right?
we'll see. Yeah.
You look at it and you say like, okay, well, if this happens, I'm literally never going to get this line again. And like, so I don't want to wait to see it happen to then go jump in.
Also an amazing matchup too. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's a great matchup against the Pelicans.
yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah,
this is a perfect matchup for this type of play. So you're like, I don't want to like, I don't want to kill the edge by waiting. I want to jump all over it. What is your thought process, or like how do you get there sometimes and saying like, all right, like I don't just want the base, like I want to try to hit a home run here because of like this new circumstance.
yeah. It just kind of comes down to knowing rotations, knowing minutes, knowing projected usage, and then matching that up with what the books have. Kind of just really what it is, and it's just, I mean, knowing situations that are unique, being able to like identify that, I think is something that comes with just knowing teams and watching games and
Yeah.
knowing ball. You know?
Yeah, like it's funny. It's funny though because I think that there are people that have like a little bit of nuance in terms of it, and like there's people that say like, oh, well, like I know, like some of my friends like they love basketball. They're horrific basketball bettors, and then I have other people that like don't give a shit about basketball. They're just like, this is great. I can bet on it every day. And then they like,
Yeah,
and they're not bad at it because they're looking at the data, they're looking at some of the numbers and
yeah.
whatever. I think that especially as the playoffs start to come, understanding the ball aspect of it, I think becomes actually much more important than even in the regular season. It's like
You
we
kind of have
talked
to,
about.
yeah, you kind of have to put your mind, put yourself in the coach's shoe. I'll say on the point of view, like, what would he be doing? Is there a certain type of player that just doesn't fit the matchup? Maybe that he's going to see fewer minutes, and another player can
Yeah.
see more minutes because of that. That's a good example. I just to do a little bit of like a cutaway on this is, I bet on Isaac Okoro under 12.5 PRA when Donovan Mitchell was out. And you would think that it's, he'd see a higher role because he's out, but there's a reason they got DeAndre Hunter, and it's to replace that. So it's just, like I said, it goes back to just knowing the rotations and yeah,
And understand, yeah, it's just
yeah,
understanding like what the replacements are.
yeah,
And I think that at a certain point, like understanding that, like for example, we'll talk about the Grizzlies in a little bit because Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be missing some time. But certain players you would think, right? You go, oh well, like this player should see a bump, and like you see it in the stat lines, like you see like John Morant's his points line because Jaren's going to be out is going to be higher. If
hmm
you really dive into it, he actually scores fewer points per
yeah.
100 possessions when Jaren's not in the game. So there's a little bit more to it, and I think you have to kind of understand it's like, well, who's actually replacing that player? Who's actually going to fill in this role? And how are we going to try to capitalize on that?
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I think a good tool, if anyone's listening that wants to know exactly how you can do that, free tool, fantasylabs.com/NBA/on dash off. Very great tool. You can literally see how rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, all the percentages change when you pretty much filter
Yeah.
off a player from the court.
Yeah, you can
I use
use
that all the time.
Yeah, I use that. I use PvP stats, which is great too. And then like obviously like you can run like the stat muse or like anything else where you go player with, player without, like whatever. Like you can do that obviously. But I do think that you miss a little bit of you definitely miss a lot of the sample, especially for like when a player has been out for the very first time and you don't know how this player is going to really interact with them, but you can at least try to apply some of the on-court and off-court data
Yeah,
in the games they
100%.
played together. But I wanted to get into the slate. I know that it's a little bit early to normally, like, I feel like I've been recording the show later and later and later, but like, so we're a little bit early because, we want to get to bed at a reasonable hour here. And I wanted to walk through the slate with PB here
Sure,
and
yeah.
talk a couple games and, see, even if there's not necessarily a player that we like or don't like in these games, but try to at least talk through the matchups a little bit. So we'll start off with probably like the greatest game on the slate is the Utah Jazz versus the Washington Wizards. The Wizards are 4.5-point home favorites, which is a shocking thing to even say. And, like we talked about this before with like these teams that are running their like basically into the ground, just trying to get a better draft pick. Like, do you have any thoughts on either of these teams, like on a player to watch even? I know Kyle Filipowski's been, like I mentioned him before, but he's actually been getting some serious burn lately for the Utah Jazz. The Wizards have been a little weird because we're seeing Middleton, we're seeing Marcus Smart. Like, what do you have any thoughts on either of those teams?
I mean, I think it's going to be a fun game. These are both teams with equal objectives going on right now. Both teams like still just developing their younger talent. The Wizards, this is like their third or fourth game now with their rotation and their new trade pieces without Jordan Poole. I think you could look into some Bilal Coulibaly overs or some like Chris Middleton overs, or I think overs galore is going to be in this game.
This game's
Because
gonna be
I think it's
fast.
going to be close. It's going to be fast paced. But as far as like the Utah Jazz side, can you give me like a heads up on? I can't see in front of me, but who's in, who's out?
Yeah, so right now we've got just looking at that's part of it too. Like I always have, I'm either looking at
Utah's one of those teams. You can't.
ESPN's got ESPN's is decent. It's not updated the most. If you really want the best injury reports, just go on the actual NBA like website for their injury reports. But right now, what I'm looking at is Springer's questionable, John Collins is out, Sexton is out, Markkanen is out, Kessler is out, Clarkson is out, and Taylor Hendricks is out. So it's actually good right now. Like we have a pretty clear picture that Utah is basically playing their youth movement in this game,
Right,
which
right.
I think matters, and I also think it's indicative of the fact that they're playing Washington. Because if we look at the standings, right? Washington obviously is 11-49. Utah is 15-46. Utah like has to lose this game. This is a game like you have to lose if you want to have a chance because it's basically it's a double. It's a double game. So I'm very curious to see how Utah plays their rotations.
Yeah.
Collier has been somebody that's been excellent.
Yeah, his minutes have been out of all the players, he's been the most consistent guy, I'd say, in terms of minutes.
Yeah, he had that little lull like a couple games ago. He was at like 24, like randomly, but he's mostly playing like 30 minutes a night, each and every night. His points line it feels a little high. Right now I'm fetching only from really underdog and sleeper. So these lines are always kind of like, I feel like they're a little fake, but they're, they do give at least an indication of where we're probably going to be. And, he's at 12.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, 8.5 assists. The 8.5 assists definitely feels like a great spot against Washington, as long as we expect him to get some run.
Yeah, I think with that just comes down to more clarity behind the guards and if who's playing and who's not. You never know. Like the one thing I've learned with Utah is that out of nowhere, a guy will get just downgraded to questionable. So that's something that I don't think I've ever really taken Utah Jazz prop in the morning because of that. Honestly,
it's hard. It's really hard. Like I took.
I like your wavelength though with Collier and the assists. I'm looking at the last game, right, where they played the Detroit Pistons, 28-point loss. Collier played 12 minutes in the fourth quarter.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like it's really odd because what I'm trying to figure out with them is almost like Andrew O'Connor-Watts said this, and so did Jim Turby actually. So it's really interesting because they were talking about Utah and they were basically saying Utah is fascinating because they basically they play all their starters and like all their main people in the games that they are like definitely going to lose. And then the games that they like might not lose, if they played everybody, they sit them all. So like this is a
Didn't
game.
realize that.
This is like one of those games, right? And you look at it and you go, it's actually really important that they lose. So you wonder like how far down the rotation can they get? How fucked up do they get with the minute rotations? And like Collier, a guy that I think, should probably get more burn, right? The game,
Yeah,
what game he played the fewest minutes in the last 10 was the game against the Portland Trailblazers, another team that's like not as
that's
high
a
up in
tough
the
team.
standings, right? I think Portland is really good now, and we're going to talk about Portland next. But the game that he played, like some of the fewest minutes, was against them. Granted, he played also against New Orleans, so it's always tough with Utah to try to really triangulate who is going to play and who isn't going to play.
Yeah.
But next up, briefly, before we get actually no, we'll go to this game first. We've got the Trailblazers versus the Celtics. Celtics are 10.5-point home favorites. Celtics are really bad against the spread at home, actually. But we both are sitting on some juicy tickets for the Portland Trailblazers to make the play-in tournament. I've got a 55-1. I know you got a 40-1. How are you feeling about that ticket now with obviously the Kyrie Irving news, the Phoenix Suns being the Phoenix Suns? Like how are you feeling about that ticket right now with them just a couple losses out of the play-in?
I'll tell you this. So I took the bet All-Star break, which was like a month ago.
Yeah.
And they started to lose like 2 or 3 games. Ayton got ruled out, Jerami Grant, all that. And I kind of felt a little bit nervous on where I stood. And now it's the complete opposite. I feel really confident. It's like plus 1,100. It's way, way off the market.
Yeah.
I think way off pricing wise. This team seems to be really wanting to buy in. Like everyone's in together. Chumani Kamara just won Defensive Player of the Month, which is huge. Players are starting to like figure out their identities. I think, Clingan is getting some meaningful minutes, and I think the team's on the uprise. Whereas, like what you just said, Dallas Mavericks losing Kyrie Irving now, apparently Anthony Davis may not come back. Phoenix Suns, they're just maybe a breaking point with them,
Yeah.
Especially if they lose to the who they playing?
Clippers today, and I think right now they're down 65-49 at half. So they're not in a good place. I would say right now.
Yeah. So all it takes is a couple of games, and the players with their high egos, Booker, Durant, like they'll start to just like lose energy. Hey, is this uphill battle even worth playing tournament?
Yeah,
I don't know. So yeah, I feel really solid. I mean, I think it's just those two teams that they just got to get past, and I think really good chance that could happen. Also, Sacramento Kings low key. How bad is this Sabonis injury going to be?
Yeah, because they said he was going to miss a week. And you never know, like Sabonis isn't like the youngest dude in the world either. So, a hamstring injury, as like it takes a minute to kind of recover from. So like this game is interesting because over the last 10 games, Boston is actually 6-3-1 against the spread. Portland, I think the market's starting to catch up to them a little bit. They're 5-5 against the spread. But Boston as at home is 12-18 against the spread. And as a favorite, 25-31-3. On the flip side, Portland is 21-1 as an underdog this season. So they've been excellent as an underdog. And actually, if we look over the last 2 weeks, well, who do you think would have the better point differential over the last 2 weeks, Portland or Boston?
Yeah, obviously Boston.
So obviously Boston, right? Boston's good, 4-2 record plus 4.6.
Yeah.
Portland 5-2 plus 12-point differential. So Portland has been really, really good. I feel great about this ticket. I might look if I was
good timing to have me on the show. We both have the same type of like
ticket. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if anything, what I would do now is like if I wanted to hedge the ticket, I don't think I would bet no on them. I would probably just bet like Phoenix, yes, I think.
Okay.
Because I think that when I look at what's going on in Dallas, I think that the situation's like really bad. And honestly, like even if they get
I have no hope in Dallas. They just lost Jaden Hardy too. I mean, that's not.
They just have no ball handlers.
Yeah.
There's nobody that's going to do anything there. So like I have severe concerns with.
You're going to see though. This is what I'm saying. Like the news is going to break by Shams or whoever, Evan Sitter, whatever the guy's name is. Anthony Davis is not going to play the rest of the season, and then those odds are going to like skyrocket.
Yeah, and it's going to set us to be up in a pretty good spot. So. Curious about this game. I would lean towards Portland at plus 10.5, but at the same time, it's tough because Boston just will blow your doors off. They're a team that, they either cover by a shitload or they just lose outright. So definitely interested to see that game. Then turning to the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Charlotte Hornets. The Hornets are 9-point underdogs at home. to Minnesota. I think DiVincenzo won a lot of people a lot of free bet money the other day because he led the
That's fun.
league in threes. It was crazy. I don't know if you saw it. It was like a $3,600 free bet.
No.
Just absolutely outrageous.
That's cool.
Really cool for anybody that had Dante DiVincenzo. But looking at this game, Minnesota Timberwolves have been like struggling obviously this season. I think relative to obviously where they were last year. They're reintegrating Dante DiVincenzo, Julius Randle. You know, how do you kind of navigate when teams have players coming back from injury or coming back from these long absences, or even like, and I guess it's the corollary to that is whether they're coming back from an injury or if they're like on a new team where, you know, we're a little bit past the trade deadline, but kind of similar concept.
Yeah, it kind of just comes down to how severe their injury was and what their recovery looked like. Is it going to be something like a D'Angelo Russell who, you know, comes back as off the bench, or you know what I mean? Like, start. I'm not even sure. Do you know if D'Lo started?
I think D'Lo's been starting, but
yeah, certain team. What I'm trying to say is like certain teams bring back, you know, they reintegrate injured players different ways.
Yeah.
Whether it be like limited minutes. Now, what I will say with Minnesota coming into this matchup versus the Hornets, it's a back-to-back. They just played tonight. What's going to happen with Randall? What's going to happen with DiVincenzo? Again, both guys still kind of coming back from injuries. I think the narrative, though, for this game is going to be the battle between Edwards and LaMelo, right? The number one versus number two pick.
Yeah.
They kind of rivals, or
I feel like they always try to they kind of get up against each other whenever they get the opportunity to. And I do think it's an interesting spot because it's a back-to-back for Minnesota. Rudy Gobert did not play. He's missed a lot of time lately, but he did not play on Tuesday night. So we have to see then, you know, DiVincenzo and Randall both coming back from an injury. Are they going to play both ends of the back-to-back? How does that impact them? And then does Rudy Gobert come back? So those are always some things that it's hard to bet into. Sometimes I do think that you can bet into it early, right? Because these teams on back-to-backs, they don't have the same reporting requirements as teams that aren't on a back-to-back for the injury report. So like right now, they're not expected to report what their injuries are until really like tomorrow, but like later in the day or Wednesday later in the day, right?
Yeah, and there's a reason why I don't think any sportsbook has listed a player props for this game, because this is a pretty questionable game just for both sides, to be honest with you. You don't know what the story with LaMelo is either, and he's a big factor on anything with his props than his surrounding teammates' props. They're all kind of based upon LaMelo playing.
Yeah, because his usage is just preposterous.
Yeah.
I do
Joe,
think...
one quick thing too. You know, we spoke about the Celtics Portland game. Watch out for Boston. I mean, they've listed every single one of their players as questionable. So
yeah, I know they've got Tatum is questionable, Brown is questionable, Pritchard's probable, White's probable, Holiday doubtful, Porzingis doubtful. So I would imagine that, you know, the doubtful guys sit. Maybe we see it's interesting whenever I see illness, because multiple players have illness right now. I would lean more towards Brown probably being out.
Okay.
I would lean like Tatum. Maybe Tatum is a shoulder issue, they're saying, but Pritchard could have a big game. But that's also part of why I like Portland too, because Portland
covered the spread, right?
I like Portland to cover the spread. They're plus 10.5.
Okay.
They really aren't listing too many players that are like new, or so to speak.
I think Jerami Grant could play too, right? Well, that's a big boost.
They said he's questionable for that game. So I like Portland at 10.5. I think that's a good spot for Portland, especially if Boston sits a lot of players. So.
Yeah, and one last thing before we continue going forward.
Sure.
Just a little bit of like what my thought process is, like how I'm preparing. Joe just said, you know, one of Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum is questionable. My thought is like, if one of those guys are ruled out, I'm going to be a little bit more inclined to take the under on the guy who's playing, because I think that they're going to get the Tumani Kamara assignment. Yeah. And it'll be easier to figure out who he's going to be guarding if one of those guys is out. So that's going to be my kind of take. But yeah, we can move forward.
No, I totally get what you're saying, because the windup too is like when those guys are out, it generally has been to the benefit more so of like the Derek Whites, the Peyton Pritchards, the Sam Hausers, like the guys further down the rotation, honestly. So definitely like an interesting point, a little interesting bit of nuance there. I want to turn to now we're talking about your team. Let's talk about the Heat versus the Cavs. The Cavs are 10.5-point home favorites. They have been just ripping through the NBA. What do you think about this? What do you think about Miami generally this year? You know, how are you feeling about this game? Is there anything that you want to target? I know like sometimes it's like we know our teams better than any other team, but then sometimes it's also harder, I think, in a way to bet games that your team's in because you have like a little bit of a bias sometimes.
Again, it's the main theme of the show is just the questionable tags going in. This team is flat out like banged up. I mean, Jovic is gone. Their role players are like collecting injury tags.
Yeah. And like Khalil Ware is out already
Khalil
too.
Ware's out. Yeah. I'm curious to see do you know if Mobley's playing next game? Because I know he was out tonight.
My guess would be yeah. My guess would be maybe that they are going to sit. I don't know if Allen's going to play both ends of the back-to-back, but maybe that they sit somebody there. Like somebody's going to sit, somebody's an extra day of rest. That would be my thought, especially now that Ware is out. Like knowing that Ware is going to be out, I think it helps you because you know that Miami's not going to go double big. As good as Bam Adebayo.
They may actually have. I'm not kidding. You could potentially, if the double big lineup is out, they may have to go Kevin Love at power forward. They did it last night.
Yeah,
they could do that. Kevin Love and Bam Adebayo. There's a chance that could happen.
Yeah, they ruled Andrew Wiggins out already too. So
really? Wow.
Yeah, so they're really like cutting it pretty thin here. This has been like I feel like I don't want to call it the year from hell, but it's been a rough year for Miami. What do you think about Tyler Hero's been in the most improved player conversation, and his odds have kind of fluctuated throughout the season. I think there's some 3-to-1s. It's weird because, and I want to talk about the market in a minute, but he's like as long as 30-to-1 is what I'm seeing right now in the market for most improved. What like as somebody that watches the Heat all the time, when you look at Tyler, obviously his numbers have improved. Do you feel like it's more of like an actual improvement, or is it just he's getting more run? Like, what do you think the situation is with Tyler?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. I've been to a lot of the Heat games in person, and you can just see the team looks a complete shell of themselves. Whenever Hero is off the court, he runs the entire offense. The team is pretty much like if his game is going. And I know like a lot of the times, you see him score 30 points and they don't win, but he really carries that offense. So I definitely think in terms of like stepping up, yes. And he's also like what we were just saying, a product of the situation. Volume, of course, has to be there because he's the only guy on the team that can really shoot, him and Bam.
Yeah.
Now, do I think it's most improved worthy compared to like guys like Cade Cunningham or, Amen Thompson, just names? I don't think so. I mean, he's already won a lot of awards in the past, like six man.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to win the most improved. Or is that something that you think could happen?
I feel like it's possible. I really think that the way the market is and the way that the voters are, like I thought Norman Powell's case.
Norman Powell, that was
right.
Yeah.
I thought his case was the most compelling, but now it looks like he's going to miss too many games. He's not going to be eligible for the.
Wow, that's
right.
big. Yeah.
So that sucks. And the market has kind of reflected this. I think that Franz Wagner was definitely going to be like in the driver's seat for it early in the season. Then he got hurt. So then, that kind of goes out the window. But Cade Cunningham fits a lot of the criteria. I think that the tough thing I think the thing that's been tough, and I'm curious to know your thoughts, is, at the end of the day with these awards, it doesn't really matter like who we think is going to win, right? The only thing is like with these awards, you have to worry about who is going to get voted on, right? All right, so we had a little technical issues there, but this should still be like relatively smooth. We're doing the best we can here. So obviously in the most improved conversation, looking at the award, Cade Cunningham is the betting favorite. Then you have right now, depending on the book, there's some Dyson Daniels in second. Then you have Tyler Hero, Christian Brown. There's a little bit of Amen Thompson there. So looking at this, like Cade's jump, I think from, like really good to like star, I think is one of the bigger leaps that you can take in the space. Mm-hmm. However, like I kind of struggle with the idea of it. I don't know if you struggle with it either, but like he's a former number one pick. Like he should win this award. Or he should improve. He's supposed to improve. He's supposed to be like a franchise cornerstone. Like what do you think about a number one pick being able to even win most improved?
So yeah, I agree with you in the most point, but I think it's a kind of an exception for Cade Cunningham. This is my opinion. I think he's really taken like the all-star franchise type, cornerstone franchise player for the Detroit Pistons. And that's a big leap in itself. So I think that is a little bit rewarding, especially with, the drastic turnaround this team has had from like, what was it, 18 wins last season to where they are now. And like, not even in consideration of being in the play-in tournament, but being in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And this is also without Jaden Ivey as well. So I think that also can, you got to give a little bit more respect towards. But if this was any other type of year or any type of like top 5 pick, I really don't think like the reward should belong to him. Denny Abdia would be a good. I mean, if he was doing what he's doing now, like earlier on in the season, I think he would have been in contention. I kind of feel bad for Norman Powell though because of this injury and how many games he could miss, and if that is what you're saying disqualifies him. I think if we're talking about who, like by definition, should earn it, I really think he should. I mean, yeah, like just going back to what I'm saying, like Cade really took the step up this season, so
Yeah,
it does make sense.
It's disappointing for Norm. I thought that Norm's progression was crazy, making that type of jump at like when you're 31 years old. Not that like 31's old, but it's old for the NBA, right? And you make this huge jump, or like way outperforming Paul George, who left in the offseason, obviously. Really wish he could go to Norm. I just don't, it doesn't look like he's going to be able to play enough games to, kind of get anything in this spot. Now, looking at this matchup between the Heat and the Cavs, Cleveland has brought in a number of new players, obviously, including DeAndre Hunter at the deadline. What do you think about Cleveland? Do you have anything that you would consider or that you maybe look for in this game, or that you're looking for in Cleveland, moving forward?
If I'm not mistaken, I don't think Donovan Mitchell has the best history versus Miami. Miami tends to do pretty good at stopping number one options. Most recently, Trae Young. If you could back me up here if you want. This is just off the top of my head.
Checking.
Fact check me real quick. But no, I mean, like, I think it just comes down to who's available for Cleveland tomorrow. It's a back-to-back. These are always tricky situations. And we were just talking a little bit off air. Like, I wish I could give an actual pick. Like, I really want to, but I think, like, it's a breath of fresh air if maybe I don't, and I give a reasoning as to why. Like, what's the logic behind why I'm a little bit hesitant?
Yeah.
Like the back scenes behind that. So yeah, I mean,
You're right. Actually, since he joined Cleveland, he's only scored over 20 points in 3 games out of 7. So he's only scored 20 plus in 3 out of 7. One game he had 42. Another game he had 34, and another game he had 27. But he's got games at 12, 18, 16, 13. So you're right. Like, they do a good job of limiting him. And I think a lot of it has to do with the type of coverage that they throw.
Yeah.
Like they'll throw 2 on ball. Like they'll say somebody else can beat us. Like, we don't care. Like,
well, yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of zone. If you said Andrew Wiggins is out and also Kyle Ware is out, like the non-Bam minutes, they have to run zone.
Yeah, you have to. And like, I guess another guy to kind of keep an eye out for is Davion Mitchell, because he's been really good lately. Missed last game. He's on the report for this game. Was known as like a really, really strong defensive player. He would be somebody that could maybe tackle like a one-on-one assignment, or, but whether it's on Mitchell or Darius Garland. So probably somebody to keep an eye out for. But that's a good look from, like, Mitchell under.
If I'm knowing, my Heat team, I would say, yeah, if Davion doesn't play, Rozier has to play. I think Rozier, like, Davion's been eating his minutes, so maybe some Rozier overs. Alec Burks, I think, is another guy that's like a true professional,
Yeah. As a former Knick, I know. So it's always interesting with Burks. But all right, yeah, that's not a bad look for that game. So let's turn to one of the teams that obviously we touched on before, as a team that maybe is like going to start a tank, but the Dallas Mavericks are 9.5 point road underdogs to the Milwaukee Bucks.
Okay.
The Bucks are on a back-to-back, so you always have to wonder, who's going to be in, who's going to be out. What do you think about Dallas? Like, how are you going to bet them? Are you going to bet them? Well, Max Christie's been good, but they're really, really thin right now.
I think one of the biggest, so to say, like, you don't want to say winner, but like one of the biggest guys that are going to be in better situations going forward from this aftermath. They're without Jaden Hardy now. They're without Kyrie Irving. Spencer Dinwiddie is going to be a guy that's going to have an insane role, I think, going forward. We just saw it happen tonight, with Trae Young versus the Bucks, and he scored 29 points. I think he may have to like really lean into his ISO game and kind of create offense, because Dallas is really missing a lot of weapons. I don't know if PJ Washington's playing. Najee Marshall is another guy, but I'm a little bit worried about him with meeting with Brook Lopez or Giannis in Rome and on drives. So, I mean, I think, like, I hate to say it, but I feel like Bucks spread, but you don't know if Damian Lillard or Giannis are going to not play. So that's the thing.
Yeah, I think that's a game that maybe you just wait for, because at the end of the day, right, look, let's put it this way. If Giannis and Dame are both in, Kyle Kuzma's probably going to be in too. You look at this and you go, this is just it's a massive talent gap in terms of the two teams. And then
Yeah.
when you look at Dallas, like sometimes I think the teams can coalesce around a star getting hurt or like an injury or something like that. But when you look at the state of the Dallas Mavericks right now, I don't know if this team can do that. I think that they were trying to do that with Kyrie Irving at the helm. And like you saw them just get their shit kicked in after Kyrie got hurt last game. So I think it makes it very, very difficult for Dallas to kind of keep up in some of these spots. I think Najee Marshall probably sees like a little bit of a bump. He's somebody that maybe gets a little bit more of an opportunity as well. But either way, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I think it's Dinwiddie. Like I said, I'm just looking at the box score right now in front of me. Dinwiddie led the team in total field goals made, and he didn't play the fourth quarter.
Yeah, like he almost like has to, because he's probably the only guy that can really handle the ball like effectively for that team, which is tough. But two more games, or really three more games left, but we'll touch on some of them a little bit faster here. But we've got the Kings versus the Nuggets. Nuggets are 6.5-point home favorites. Strother looks like he's going to be out for an extended period of time based on that knee injury that I think it was a knee injury that he suffered. So he is going to be out. Yeah, they're saying that he's like week to week. He's going to miss the next 4 weeks. So that's basically taking you right up until the end, like the very end of the regular season. Jokic is questionable. Aaron Gordon is questionable. Peyton Watson at least is questionable, so he got a little bit of an upgrade here. When you look at this game, the Kings are obviously without Domantas Sabonis. Like I think this is going to be like a Jokic god tier game against.
Fully, yeah. If there's like king of the court, whatever, like PRA, that's the guy you choose.
Yeah, like I don't even know what number they're going to put up for him, but like I'm probably going to want to be on the over. But sometimes when there's a player with like an elite matchup, like Jokic has this fantastic matchup, obviously, against the Kings in the spot. Sometimes those lines get like really inflated. How do you, how do you go about like trying to capitalize on that perceived like excellent matchup, even if like the player that you normally want to bet on or that you would gravitate towards, his lines might be a little bit too inflated.
Yeah. That is another thing, too, that I think people need to pay a little bit more attention to. There's websites that help you track closing line values on player prop points. I think that's really good to see. Like, hey, there's a 4-point bump, and it's also a good matchup, but maybe the bump also incorporates that. So is there really an edge? So just realizing situations like that. But, I mean, to go back to Jokic, this is an absolute smash spot for him up against Joval. Cannot defend the pick and roll for his life. Has to be on the court too, because they don't really have anyone else that they could throw at him. And I think also as well, like if you're looking at an alternative way to look at this, now Joval could be in foul trouble, so this could kind of go against me, but Trey Lyles was a guy that I got extended run last game in the blowout versus the Mavericks. Kings played the Mavericks, they blew out. Trey Lyles played all the fourth quarter minutes, and I think that really inflated his line going into the next game where Joval's going to have to play. Both those guys can't be on the court together. So if Joval's playing more minutes and Trey Lyles is playing less minutes, if you're following what I'm saying, an under for Trey Lyles is where I would look for this.
Yeah.
As well as, an over on Jokic.
Yeah, and that's probably going to be a line that we have to wait. Definitely, I would say closer to tip. I think that might have to be something as well, but definitely a good angle here. And I think that Valanciunas, I think the thing is too, there's this thought that like you have to play the big, right? Like you have to play these traditional lineups. And one of the things that I think is interesting is when you're a team like Sacramento, obviously against Denver, maybe you need to play the big because you're dealing with Jokic, right? But if you're a team like Sacramento, you have so many other like wings. You have Malik Monk, you have DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, you have Keegan Murray, who's huge, right? Like he could play a little bit at the 5 if he had to, depending on the matchup. I think that they're like Valanciunas is not necessarily optimal in every matchup. So here, I think he probably has to be on the court, but I don't know if that's going to stick true to every type of matchup that Sacramento is going to have moving forward. So definitely something to keep an eye on. It's not just going to be like automatic plug and play. He's going to see all this bonus minutes. There's definitely a little bit more to it than that. But I want to talk about what I think might be the best game on the slate, at least in terms of like what the expectation was the Thunder versus the Grizzlies. Grizzlies are 7.5 point home underdogs. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be out for the next couple of weeks. It looks like we've seen the market move for Defensive Player of the Year. It's coalesced around Evan Mobley now, seeing that news. Do you have any thoughts on this game? Oklahoma City's been rolling right now. Can Memphis keep up? And if you were going to play somebody, who would you maybe be looking for in this matchup?
Right. Yeah. Memphis defensive rating goes down a massive hill, like insane downgrade without Jaren Jackson. I'm afraid this could maybe be a blowout, but it is in home in Memphis. I think this could be a good J-Dub game, like Jalen Williams. He's a guy that likes to do well versus transition, and Grizzlies give that up a lot.
Yeah.
22.5 points. I think that's okay. Actually,
Yeah.
it's a lot. He's coming off a 24-point game and a 41-point game.
It's an interesting spot, too, because, like, you would think if you were looking at Memphis...
I don't know who's going to be able to guard the double big. So what are they going to do, right? It's Chet and
Hartenstein.
So how are they going to match up? Is Zach Edey going to... Does he have to now be on the court to an additional extra minutes because of that?
Yeah, like, I question that. I think that, like, I guess you probably see Aldama play a little bit more. Yeah. Maybe LaRavia plays a little bit more.
Kings.
Honestly, like I think that Chet is going to have a really good game.
Yeah,
like, I think this kind of aligns for him. Yeah, because it's like they don't really have anybody great to throw on him. If it is Chet versus Edey, Edey's going to have to play in a drop. Like it's not a great scenario. Chet can pull up and shoot threes. He can pull up from the elbow. Like I think this is a good Chet spot here. I do think the player that most people would want to be gravitating towards is probably like John Morant. You go, all right, like he's going to get up in this game. He's going to want to get up against Shea, like whatever. I think John might like literally be in hell. Like this is like,
well,
I think
one of the
worst.
6 for 19. I'm looking at
like, I think this is one of the worst matchups for him probably in the league because of how many wings Oklahoma City has to throw at him.
I like that take.
You know, so I'm going to be looking to see where exactly his line is. I think
24 and a half.
I would probably be on that under, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they're really good at stopping transition, really good at stopping the pick and roll ball handler.
Yeah.
Really good ISO defense. Dort's probably going to be all over him, right?
Yeah, he's going to see minutes. He's going to see Dort. He's going to see Shea. He's going to see probably a little bit of J-Dub. If like it's like impossible to deal with him. So I'm definitely going to be grabbing that. I'm only seeing it on really like Fanatics right now. So probably.
I think on that same note too. Now on the other end, if you're looking for an over,
yeah,
Jalen Wells could be in a good spot. I think he likes to take those corner threes a lot, which is what OKC tends to give up. If what we are saying in that the attention is going to be all over John Morant, Jaren Jackson's out, they're going to also need Jalen Wells to guard SGA. So I think the minutes are going to be there. That's always been a thing is like,
like he has to play almost.
Yeah. 12 points last game on 11 shots. I mean, the line's 12.5. That can be okay. I think that's fine.
Yeah, I like it. I could definitely see him getting there, especially with just like a couple extra shots, maybe opening up without Jaren on the floor. So let's look at the last game on the slate quick. We've got the Pistons versus the Clippers. Clippers are plus 1.5 point home. They're actually home dogs here, which I'm a little bit surprised about, but they are on the back-to-back. They're playing their second game in as many days. So we've actually seen this balloon to its jump from plus 1.5 to plus 3. So I'm curious if the thought process is, Norman Powell's not going to play again.
Yeah.
Maybe Kawhi Leonard sits on a back-to-back. I guess the pivot almost has to be Harden. What do you think, though? Because I'm curious to know your thoughts. This is going to be a battle on the interior, I think. You've got Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, and then you've got Zubac. Who do you think has the edge in that matchup? Zu's been excellent this season.
Yeah. I'll tell you this. I remember this game. They played each other not too long ago.
Yeah.
I actually took Pistons money line as my only money line bet of the season.
That's awesome.
These two teams, I think Ben Simmons will be back, right? Do you know? Or
I don't. I know he didn't play.
These two teams currently,
he didn't play
especially on a back-to-back. Well, I will say it's a blowout tonight versus the Phoenix Suns, so maybe the starters may get a little bit extra rest. Jalen Duren had 19 rebounds the last time he played the Clippers. I thought that was kind of interesting.
That's a lot of boards. Probably because Zoo plays in the paint. That's just what he does.
He needs to be out there.
And
think about it. Who's going to put him in foul trouble, right? Maybe Kawhi or the Zoo. I don't know who really puts him in foul trouble.
Zoo will get some usage, but it's not as much like driving to the rim. So I think that's a good take where it's like if he can be insulated a little bit from some of the foul trouble, that definitely kind of helps you. It definitely helps him out, like staying on the floor. Because I feel like that's always the concern with Duran. It's just like, is he gonna get in foul trouble? And when we look at what LA does, they're 19th frequency at the rim. So like they really don't get to the rim like at all. And I think that definitely would help any Jalen Duran prop. So maybe we look at his rebounds for this game where, he's got the matchup kind of opposite of Zubac.
Yeah, another thing too, I noticed, I'm looking at the box score in front of me. Harden had 12 rebounds. I mean, that's kind of interesting. Oh, this is what happened. I understand what happened. So Kawhi didn't play this game.
Yeah.
It's a back-to-back again.
Probably won't play tomorrow or today, Wednesday either, I would think.
So they're going to be without Powell. Now they're going to be also without Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah.
Why are we not taking Pistons spread?
Yeah. And I think that's the way the line is moving too. Because
it's 3.5. Pistons 3.5. That's what the line is.
Yeah.
So it is in Los Angeles this time.
Yeah, and it opened 1.5. So the Pistons are definitely catching some steam. They're going to have a rest advantage. I don't mind that really at all. I think that Detroit should be in a good position here.
He's going to be out though. Tobias will be out Wednesday. Just check.
Yeah. So probably see a little bit more minutes for Asar Thompson.
Yeah.
He'll probably get some good run. And I think he would be useful in this like type of matchup. So maybe some of that, and then maybe some Duran rebounds if the Clippers have some tired legs, miss a couple extra shots.
Yeah, I like that.
Extra rebound opportunities.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So that takes us through the Wednesday slate, and then we always get to the end of the episode and we do a little bit of pods and recs. But I did want to touch on right before we do that. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about like what your thought process is, like when you're betting some of these games, like when you're betting, and trying not to, I guess, like sometimes like when there's only like a smaller slate or there's a big slate, right? Like I think smaller slates, like people go like, well, I need to have like X amount of plays.
Yeah.
And then on the bigger slates, you go, well, there's a lot of games. Like I want to have, there's probably an edge in every game for people that are out there, like, that are trying to be responsible with their bankrolls. What's your number one piece of advice for not over leveraging yourself on any given day?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the last thing you want to do, right? Is falling victim to that. I think Sundays going forward now without football, it's really easy to kind of overexert yourself with plays just with how spread out these games are, and you want to have action on the 1 o'clock games and the 3 o'clock because now football doesn't take over. You really have to be disciplined and really kind of just gravitate towards what speaks value to you and your process, and really kind of just like take out the noise because it is really easy. And I think if you really kind of filter out and you stick with your process, the bets and I think the results are going to carry on. And I think it's going to, like, even though maybe the quantity maybe is not as much as you want it to be, the quality will outweigh that. And I think it'll be better for you in the long run. So, yeah, I mean, like, I never really let the slate size determine my volume. I mean, on the other way around, like, there could be a 3-game slate and I may have 9 props or like 8 props.
Yeah.
Just depends. It just depends on what the value, speaks to me that day.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. It's like, it's hard when you're a fan and you want to watch the games. You're like, I want to have, like, you really got to,
you just got to control yourself. That's what it is.
Like, I think there's a point where it's like, look, like you just have to appreciate the hoop that you're watching. And it's like, you don't necessarily need to have a play on every single game that you're interested in or watching.
Glad you brought that up.
That's probably the most important thing. So let's take that into pods and recs here. I don't know if you have something off the top of your head that you'd like to recommend to the listeners. And maybe you did something today, maybe you ate something. If you need a second, I can give mine first. But I
can go for sure.
All right, awesome. Hit us with it.
I really haven't had so much time to do other things aside from like watching basketball and watching Netflix or whatever. I caught on a really good show. Both you and I, we bet on the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
We bet on, Team USA in the basketball. If you haven't seen it already, I definitely recommend the Netflix documentary Court of Gold or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. It takes you behind the scenes, and not just Team USA basketball, Team Canada, Team France, and, Team Serbia. And I thought it was really interesting just as an NBA bettor to kind of understand like the psyches and like, just the overall background on these players and who they were growing up, like why they played basketball, like, like seeing their stories. I think that was really cool. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a really cool show to watch if you're a basketball fan. I definitely
Yeah.
recommend it.
No, definitely. I've been watching it like slowly.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's hard, like you said, like to have extra time between watching what you have to watch and then watching what you want to watch. So I definitely am with you on that. I'll co-sign that recommendation. And then my recommendation is I got another wooden cutting board, like a bigger one. It's nice. I think it's technically supposed to be healthier for you. It's no microplastics, stuff like that. So if you have like the plastic cutting boards, like there's the microplastics. That's the new thing that they're talking about right now. So we got the wooden cutting board. I also think that there's like an aesthetic to it. It's like it has that like wooden board, like chopping board sound. So it's nice if you're cutting vegetables, something like that.
That's cool.
So recommending that. And then I'm gonna recommend, we're at that time of the year now. It's March. The weather's starting to turn a little bit. Make sure that like right now is probably the time where it's like you have to start thinking about like what you're gonna wear the first day that it gets like way too hot, because like
Can't relate to you there.
You can't relate. You're
Cannot relate to you there. But I see the memes. I do see the memes. Do you see like the Luka Doncic meme, like with him was smoking the hookah? It's like that. I want to recreate that when the first day it's hot.
First day it's too hot, because the windup is like you have clothes that you think like you want to wear, and then you're like, oh, I don't want to wear this, like or your shorts are packed away, like who knows. Make sure like you got at least a pair that's like ready to go on that first warm
I feel
day.
you on that.
So
A little bit the opposite for me. Anytime I'm traveling up north and going into colder weather,
you gotta break out the jacket or something.
yeah, like I have to get some stuff, like figure out what I have in my closet.
I know it hits 50 and you're breaking out like the parka. You gotta do what you can. But
Patagonia, whatever it's called, yeah.
right. But Prop Bomb, it was a pleasure having you on. Let everybody know where to find you. Let everybody know where to get your work.
Sure, yeah. I mean, if you want to get my official plays, of course, unfortunately, I couldn't give out anything I wanted to right now. Follow me on Dub Club, which is going to be a link in my bio. Mainly, I promote things to my X account, so just follow me on @PropBomb, and it's in my bio. I definitely recommend joining. I mean, the ROI on the bets just printing right now. Gonna have some baseball going on next month, which will be fun. And yeah, I mean, that's really all I got going on. And I'll be on some YouTube shows every now and then. And pleasure being on here, Joe. I mean, you reached out to me today out of the blue, and I was like, hell yeah, I want to come on.
Yeah. So we've been like kicking it around back and forth. We've been trying to get it done. So it worked out that we got to do it today.
Hell yeah.
So it was good. And so guys, make sure that you check out Prop Bomb, follow him on X, see his plays, like get some of those. He's always putting out good work there with some pretty extensive write-ups. So definitely go check that out. And then obviously, this episode couldn't be brought to you without Rhythm, like our good friends at Rhythm. And like I said, Rhythm is the #1 AI betting tool in the market. So be sure to subscribe, get it for a week for free, test it out, build some models, see if you like it. I'm sure you will, and come back for that 25% off in the bio as well. And we're going to be able to use that. Check out our plays, use this podcast, get some of the things that we talked about, use some of the advice, use some of the angles, and we can continue to cash that.
Hell yeah. Let's do it. Yeah, and also, by the way, just as a thank you for listening and making it this far, we both really appreciate it. And, before the show, I went ahead and I went on Dub Club and I actually applied a code. So if you made it this far, use the code Joe20 and you'll get 20% off your membership in my Discord, just as a thank you for listening and supporting.
Hell yeah. So it's always a good time, and we'll do our best in, obviously, Prop Bomb's Discord and in the huddle as well.